Hello and welcome back to the RC Racing TV build of the DeAgostini Model Space Kyosho Hummer H1. In this video we are going to be assembling steps 7 and 8, and all we're going to need for this that isn't already provided in the packages is a Phillips screwdriver, some thread locking compound or rubber-based adhesive, and a pair of scissors or a knife to get into the bags. So let's get started right away with step number 7, and once we have all the parts outside of the bag, we'll get going. Okay, and here we are with the parts needed for step number 7. Here we've got some very tough plastic bulkheads for that are going to hold the differential that we built in the last step. That's going to fit right in there. You can see the holes where the drive shafts are going to come out of. We've also got an input shaft and a drive cup that's going to fit on that as it comes out of the as it's going into the diff case. Got a couple of large metal shielded bearings there. Look very secure. And we've got some screws to hold the diff case shut, and another screw, and a couple of Allen grub screws. Now there is a little Allen wrench provided with this. This looks like a 2.5mm wrench. So you can use something like this you can get from a model shop, an RC based model shop. This is just a swappable tool tip. So I can go from a Phillips head screw like that to 2.5mm Allen wrench, and that will basically, it's just a replacement. It's the same thing, it's just a little bit easier to use. So I'm just going to use the tools that I've got, but I might be swapping them for the L-shaped Allen wrench that's included in the model kit. So let's just dive right in. I'm going to swap this back out to the Phillips screwdriver. And we'll get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the drive shaft, which is already made for you. You don't have to do anything with that. I'm going to put a bearing right on there. There we go, and that spins very nicely. And we're going to put the second bearing on there. Very easy to do. So that's steps 1 and 2. Next, we've got the thread locker. And we're going to put the grub screw on the Allen wrench, and then just a small drop of the thread locking compound. Now you might notice I've got a bag here for the metal parts. That's because a lot of the metal parts have a bit of grease or oil on them from the factory, which is totally fine and normal. But I don't want to get it on my table here, which just has a large sheet of paper on it. So you can see as you screw that in, the grub screw is going to connect with the flat section there. You can see it reflected in the light. So we've got the grub screw in there. We're just going to leave the wrench in there for the moment. And it looks like we put that straight on. Now make sure that you put that flat section, where it's been ground flat at the factory, against the grub screw, or where the grub screw hole is. And we're just going to tighten that down. Now, if you haven't built an RC car before, what you can do to get a bit of extra torque or power, just to tighten these down, put the short end into the grub screw, into the Allen wrench, the Allen screw, and then see what I'm doing here, just grabbing that and just applying a bit of extra torque. Now if I swap out my tool tip here, this has a nice large handle on it, so you're getting the same amount of power into there. And also the tool tips, they are expensive, but they will last you. They're quite worth it for if you're going to be doing RC for a little while. Plus you get a lot of tools all in one tool, so it's very handy. So now we've got, if we do it as the instructions say, we've actually tightened it just a little bit too much. It's supposed to have a little bit of a gap. So we're just going to loosen this before the thread lock gets, looks like we need to have, you see how that can move a certain amount of distance. So we need that flush with the surface of the inside of the drive cup. So basically, so we have a little bit of space there, as you can see, between the bearings. Okay, so it pays to read the instructions before and during, obviously, you're doing all of your assembly. So now we're going to get the bottom, I believe, which side's the bottom? I think it's this side here, yep. And we're just going to rest this. Now there's a lip or an edge on the inside of the case where we're putting this. So we need the bearings to fit right inside there. Looks like I need to actually let out a bit more space, because there we go. Okay, now you can see how free that is able to move, and it's able to rest inside there. Make sure there's no gap in there, so you can see how much space you actually need to have before you put that piece in. Okay, so now if we put that in, and that just fits right in, you hear that nice satisfying noise. So now I'm just going to get the differential that we built in the last step. And here that is. You remember this step. This was in the last video. And now I'm going to make sure we look at the pictures in the instructions. And the differential is supposed to fit in this way. If you have it put in this way, you're going to have your tires going backwards to the way they're supposed to be going. So if you put it in this way, so you can see when the drive shaft comes in here. This isn't the drive shaft, obviously, this is just an example, but the drive shaft is going to be coming through here on the chassis and spinning this drive cup one way or the other. I can't remember which. I'm not sure if this is the front or the rear differential at the moment. So there's your differential. So that basically, these bevel gears are working through the gears that are inside, and just transferring power straight to the drive shafts that are going to be coming out of these two diff cups. Okay, so now we're going to get the grease bag that we had in the last step as well. And it's a good thing we didn't use all of it. If you did use all of it, just some normal multi-purpose grease from a DIY or hardware shop is going to be fine, but we need some grease to be going on the teeth of these gears. You can see just squeezing just a bit and getting a little bit of grease on every tooth. Not a huge amount, but you can see. And all the while, we're just making sure that nothing is binding too much, and everything seems to be working okay. And in this case, we're doing good. So now we're going to get the upper bulkhead piece, and obviously you can see where the screw holes are going to be fitting through, and we're just going to put that on top. There we go. It kind of clicks into place over these bearings there. So now, again, make sure, because all of these is spinning at a very high rate when you're driving, you need to make sure that you just check the diff action, make sure everything's working okay and spinning okay. And if anything's binding, investigate, have a close look, and you might have to, if something's been put together wrong, obviously you're going to have to take something apart and just have a look and make sure that everything's okay. So it looks like we've got some screws to put in now. Okay, so now we've got the diff case put together, and we've got two different screws that are going to be attaching these everything into place. We've got two of these, which are what we call machine head screws. You can see the threads are very close to each other. And we've got three of these other types of screws, which we call self-tapping. So now, and they have to go in very specific places on the diff case. So you can see we've got a few different holes here. The first ones to go in are these two here. If you hold your diff case this way, and if you hold your diff case this way, you can just barely see that this hole on this side of the case is a tiny bit smaller than the hole on this side of the case. So what that does is basically it lets you put the machine thread screws that you have two of in this pack, and then you can put those in and screw them in. And remember how we put the diff together? We didn't tighten the screws down all the way the very first time we put them in. So leave the tiniest amount of space in between, maybe about a thickness of a sheet of paper. Put in the other screw, and then just slowly tighten each one about a half a turn at a time until they're nice and tight. So that prevents all the pressure from pushing down on this side, and then this side is just a little bit loose. So now we've got that together. We're going to put in the other three screws. It looks like we might have just a single spare. So these are the 3x10 screws that are mentioned in your instructions, and these will go on either side of the drive shaft, or the drive shaft input. These are the outputs, because these go to your tires and wheels. So we're going to screw these in, not all the way. Now you're not going to wreck anything by tightening the screws down all the way, but there's just take it from someone who's built a few kits. There we go. So now we test the drive shaft. Everything seems to be fine. We are asked to just, if it is too tight, you can loosen this just by turning it, and then just press it down finger tight. Don't put a lot of pressure on it. Just finger tight, just hold it down, and then tighten that down again, and then test. And you should be fine. So let me see if I can get this to be the way it's not meant to be, and I will tighten it down all the way. Yeah, there's still a bit of play in there, so it's going to be pretty hard to get that really wrong. But if you hold one of the sides of the diff, you can see the other side turns. That's just what's called the diff action. So that's all fine. Everything's working okay. So there we go. That's step 7. And again, we've got an extra screw and an extra grub screw. So if you have these left over, you're doing okay. Don't worry about it. So now we're going to go to step 8. So step 8 is this bag. So we're just going to move these aside for the moment, because we're not going to use them just yet, but they will pop up in this step. So again, we're going to get all the parts laid out and just show you what comes in the bag. Okay, so here's all the pieces for step 8 laid out. We've got I believe this is the rear shock tower. So we probably have been working on the rear diff all this time. We've got a chassis brace, and we've got a couple of hinge pin mounts or suspension mounts. Looks like a suspension mount, and yeah, that's the rear one, that's the front one. The front one's metal because it's a brace, and you'll see why once we get to that step. We've got a cross wrench, which is pretty handy. There's something here for the glow plug. We've got an 8mm, looks like a wheel wrench, 5.5 mil for let's see, the various, probably the shock mount screws and bolts and stuff like that. We've got a couple of long machine thread screws. We've got several machine thread screws. Got some pivot balls. And lots of Phillips or crosshead screwdriver bits. Okay, so looks like we've got everything we need. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the diff case that we worked on last time, and we're going to get the front, the metal piece there, and get those lined up. And we need a 4x10 mil, a 4x10 mil, 2 of these. So 2 of these sort of short, wide ones, and we're just going to screw that in. We'll just get the first one started. So what this is the front suspension mount for the rear wheels, for the rear suspension. And it's metal because if it were plastic and you hit something and the rear wheels catch it, the metal hinge pin that will be going through here, this back suspension mount, will be fitting there. So the metal hinge pin will just pull out. It'll basically just ruin the plastic pieces there. So the fact that it's metal is nice. It's going to means that it's going to be a quite sturdy piece. So we've got those installed, and now we get the rear one. And make sure that, note how this little notch here, or the little tab, sticks out. That's going to rest into the chassis, what we call it'll key into the chassis. There'll be a slot in the chassis that fits into. And now we get the rear one, line up the holes properly, and we're going to get these really big flathead screws that are self-tapping, and we're going to put these in. There we are. So there's our, let's get that out of the way so you can see it a bit better. There we are. We're starting, these are basically suspension pieces. So we've got the drivetrain, the rear drivetrain, suspension pieces going on to the housing. And now we've got the shock tower. And what this is it's the top piece of the suspension. So, and it tells you, the instructions say very explicitly, if the front of the car is facing that way to our left on the video. This shock tower needs to face, where does it go? Looks like it goes. There we are. These little posts that are on the back face to the rear. So that's the front. You can see very clearly that that's the rear. And we're going to be using, it looks like these two screws, and it looks like there's a spare. These shorter, well, slightly longer but thinner screws. So these go into these holes here on the side. You see where they go. And then we put some, just a bit of Loctite on there. And then we just attach the pivot balls straight on. And the thread locking compound is used. I don't think that's straight on there. Make sure it's straight, otherwise it's a bit difficult to get in. The thread locking compound is used in metal to metal contacts, and when that dries, it sort of acts like a lock nut, like a plastic insert on a lock nut. So this screws just screw right in, and we've got some more thread lock. Make sure you use the blue thread lock always on RC stuff, unless you really know what you're doing and you want to use the red stuff. You can actually remove the blue, the screws that are attached by the blue thread lock, I should say. So now we've got, these are just more suspension pieces. So the upper links of the suspension are going to attach right there. The shocks are going to attach right about there, and the suspension arms are going to hang from there, and the outer suspension pieces will be attached to these 2 points here, and then again here with the shocks. But we'll get all to that in good time. Just to let you know what you're actually assembling. So now we get more of these 4x10mm screws, and we're going to be attaching, oh wait, nope, not that one. Go there. So we get 2 of these, and those go in here. Unfortunately, all the parts are black, so it's kind of hard to show. But I think you can see the screws there. So those are the first 2 screws that hold the shock tower on, and then we get the really long screws. And the reason why they're very long is so that they can go all the way down into that bottom half of the diff case. So these are pretty important screws. The shock towers take a lot of abuse, so they're have to be very securely attached to the differential cases. Also, just illustrates how important the diff cases are as being part of the backbone of the car. So there we are. You get a good idea of how it's all going to start looking. I'm just testing that because we've had the diff cases be pulled together again by these 2 screws here. So now we've got, that is the end of step 8. And so we've used parts from step 7 and 6. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but you can see where the chassis brace is going to fit there. And we've already got the screws to hold these in place. Don't lose these screws. Keep everything handy because they will be used in the upcoming steps. Right, so that is step 7 and 8 of the DeAgostini model space build of the Kyosho Hummer H1 here on RC Racing TV. We hope you enjoyed it, and please come back and follow us for steps 9 and 10 in the next video.